On September 11th, I was a senior at Stuyvesant High School, which is 4 or 5 blocks from where the World Trade Center sat.
I was 13 years old.
I think I was 15 at the time. I was a senior in high school.
It was, I think, our second or third day of school.
We're just chatting in class, waiting for our books.
And there was a lot of commotion.
It was so surreal. It just felt like a movie, you know? You're seeing that debris and the smoke.
I became very afraid. Just felt like my life was in danger.
We were there, and I don't think people really talk about the fact that there were kids there.
We experienced being a witness to history, but also ending up, like if you look back on it, being a part of history.
Absolutely everything changed that day. The city was attacked. The way of life was attacked. And having grown up here and having become adopted by New York, that felt personal. This is New York. This is home.
Going to Stuyvesant was really a dream for most of us. Immigrant children, growing up in the boroughs, getting into this elite school was something that we were sort of hoping for and expecting since we were really young.
To get into Stuyvesant, you have to take a test like the SATs, and yeah, I was, a very high-reaching, ambitious, academic kid.
My father, he wanted me to go to Catholic school. My family is very Catholic. My last name's O'Callahan. We're Irish Catholic. My dad was almost a priest, but I had a different ambition.
My parents immigrated from Bangladesh. They came in the early 70s. They grew up in very small villages. My father especially grew up in a one-room village in Bangladesh, got educated, was able to move to the city, and then eventually made his way over to the States. I can imagine it was sort of a dream. They truly believed in that American dream. Streets paved with gold, leave everything behind and come here and make it.
I was born in Ukraine. My parents were born in Kiev. And we came to the US in 1991. And so America was, my adopted country, but it had taken us in, had been good to us. But eventually, land of opportunity, was able to get into Stuyvesant, and I had a life ahead of me, and that was all thanks to America. A lot of those things weren't possible back in Ukraine.
I grew up in Brooklyn. We had just moved from Crown Heights to Bed-Stuy. My mom was very apprehensive of sending me to a school in Manhattan, and I was like, it's Stuyvesant, I get to go.
I came all the way from the Bronx, and given I don't know how many students have an hour-and-a-half commute at the age of 15. So going from the tippy top, I was at the northern part of the Bronx, cutting through the South and cutting through all of Manhattan. But I had this very ambitious, I'm gonna seize the day type of attitude too. And Manhattan seemed like such a special place, and it's the place to be.
It was a sunny day. Most days that we would commute to Stuyvesant, we would wake up 5:30 in the morning, really early. First week of school and really excited for senior year to start.
I lived in South Brooklyn, so I was 15 minutes from the nearest subway, so I would take an express bus every day.
And I met up with 2 of my friends, which we would always do because we wanted to take the train together. There was a mall there that we would pop out of the train station, walk through that mall every day, come out right underneath the towers.
My bus used to drop me off at the Century 21 right in front of the towers. I walked from there to school every morning.
Our high school's unique. It's 10 floors. We have large student bodies. So in a sense, our school's pretty awesome that way.
It was already a pretty big jump to be going to high school in the city, and just really excited, really excited.
When I started at Stuyvesant, I was about 13, and it was an interesting time for kids. The internet was sort of making its way into our lives. We were just starting to chat. None of us had cell phones, so texting was definitely not a thing.
This must have been the first, if not the second week of school. before you get your books, before you really know the routine.
It felt like any other day. My first class was actually math, and I was sitting in my math class staring out the window. And I was gazing off at the North Tower when I saw an explosion. I saw something enter the building and then an explosion. And as soon as the explosion happened, I reacted, yelling and saying, "Oh my God," at the top, like really loudly, and it stopped the whole class.
I saw the crash of the plane into the North Tower. I remember asking someone, was that a missile? And they said, no, it was a plane. And I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Did someone just fire a missile at the Trade Center? And he was like, no, I saw the tail. And I realized that I had also seen the tail.
So when the first plane hit, that just like usual sound of a garbage truck backing up and the driver probably not seeing, like maybe the garbage cans, like that thud, that's what it sounded like. And oh God, I forgot his name. He was a really sweet Spanish teacher, but I remember he had like curly gray black hair and he was very soft-spoken. He'd be like, "Mi señoras, mi señoras." That's how he'd start the day. And I just remember his just gentleness on his face just quickly disappeared when he heard that sound.
And all my classmates ran over to the window, our teacher ran over to the window, and we were all looking out at this ball of fire that was emitting from the tower.
And I'm looking at the TV, looking out the window, looking at the TV, looking out the window, and I just happen to be looking out the window and I see the second plane. And then look at the TV, and then it shows it on the TV.
And it sort of hit you like a swell of emotion that it's happening again.
And everybody at that instant realized it was a terrorist attack.
They sent us to our homerooms. I remember there was some confusion as to whether we're safer in the building or outside the building, so we didn't evacuate right away. Just a lot of commotion. There was a lot of excitement. It was adrenaline from just about everyone.
And I think I don't know, I can't say what I felt because it just felt like, I feel like I wasn't processing it yet at that point.
A lot of people talk about understanding after the second plane had hit that this was intentional and that this was a terrorist attack, and I could not make that leap. And I mean, I say leap, it was a small step at that point, 2 planes hitting the Trade Center. My mind just wouldn't make that connection.
Some students' parents or family members worked in the tower. I had an uncle that was working on the 86th floor of the South Tower, and I was thinking about him and what was going on, and I saw debris falling from the tower. And I was like, what is that? What's falling? What is that that's falling from the tower? Is that paper? It's so big. And we realized we were watching people jump from the tower down to whatever they felt at that moment was their best option.
I personally saw bodies falling out of the sky, from the building. We're like, did you just see that? And we thought it was like a chair or something falling out from the sky. And I mean, later on, we realized that must have been, people jumping out.
And as soon as I saw appendages and arms and legs, I thought that my uncle was like falling from the tower at that moment. That's the way I felt. So I became hysterical at that point. They sent us to our next class. That class became canceled, and they sent us at first to our second class, whatever, and I happened to have gym. And while we were there, the whole building shook. The whole building shook. The lights flickered, went off. They were off for about 5 or 6 seconds, I think, or it felt like that. And then something like sort of turned on, and it felt like the lights came back on, and we were all yelling and screaming and sort of running around. In retrospect, I understood that that was the time when the South Tower collapsed.
I remember that I was in that room when the first tower fell, and we saw the dust cloud coming towards our building. And we piled our book bags on top of the air conditioner just in case the dust cloud was going to come into the room.
There were random rumors flying around, a rumor of there being potentially a bomb in the building. There was a rumor of a gas leak. There was a rumor of more attacks. Things just kind of kept popping up, and frankly, anything was possible.
The principal decided we're like all evacuating now, and really asking students not to panic and to make sure to walk calmly.
Imagine being trained for fire alarms in single file lines, and then you have a moment where it's like 50 times worse than a fire, but you're still trying to keep your cool.
I remember that rush of light, the doors all opening all at once, and us like trekking out onto the West Side Highway, and we're seeing the tower, you know, the towers are right there. It was so surreal. It just felt like a movie, you know? You're seeing that debris and the smoke and all of us just like a mass exodus.
I think the second building collapsed when we had evacuated.
The ground started shaking again, and whatever we saw of the remaining tower started crumbling onto itself. And we just ran as fast as we could in the opposite direction.
The dust cloud was coming, kind of like when you see in like mummy movies, you see a sandstorm that's coming from a distance, and this just like wall of sand is coming at you and at some point encompasses you. Just a giant wall, like a mountain of dust kind of moving toward you.
I remember there's a hustle, like a real hustle to get away at least 10 blocks because people were afraid of the building. Like, you know, you don't know how buildings fall, right?
There's just people walking in the streets, there's people walking on the sidewalks, there's just people walking everywhere. And then you hear sirens everywhere. There are fighter jets like flying really low across Manhattan, and so you hear them coming and you hear them going.
And the trains weren't working. You know, when you go to a commuter high school, like that's such a part of your life. And you are immediately aware that you cannot get home unless you're willing to walk several miles.
One by one on the West Side Highway, our friend group found one another. And we found one friend, and we found another friend. Whoever we saw that we kind of knew who was South Asian, we kind of grabbed them and said, don't be by yourself, just come. Because we were young kids in the city, we felt like we looked different. We didn't want to be targeted.
There was a girl, her name was Nazia, and she wore a hijab. And we're all walking up together, and this guy just like stops and literally calls her a bitch. And we all just like froze. We just couldn't believe it. We were feeling like we were all walking together away from danger, and someone amongst us that was walking the same direction as us was looking at someone that I was with as the enemy. And it just kind of blew my mind.
I remember we were with one of the younger girls, I can't recall her name, wore a hijab. And I remember somebody from across the street, like a construction worker type dude, like yelled at her, like, go back to where you came from. And we're like, we're trying to go to Queens. Like, we're trying to go back where we came from.
The lines at payphones, which still existed in the city at that time, were like around the block because the World Trade Center was also the primary cell phone tower.
My father was at work that day. My father is a dentist, and he worked in Queens. And on the television, he saw that this was happening. And a dental assistant came into the room and told him that Stuyvesant High School exploded. That's what she heard. She may have heard evacuated and spoke, and my dad collapsed on the ground because he thought that the school exploded. And he was waiting for a call, and we had one friend who had a Nextel cell phone, which I don't even know if they exist anymore, but Nextel at the time, they had the biggest cell phones, the biggest antennas, and they just worked everywhere. He was the only friend with a cell phone, and he allowed each of us, one after the next, to call home. And I called my father, and he was bawling, crying on the phone. He's like, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in downtown Manhattan. I'm with friends." He says, "Please be safe. They don't know if there are more attacks happening." And this is something I'll remember to this day. My dad, over the phone, said to me, "Please, please, just survive." And him saying that to me made me realize sort of the predicament I was in. I knew, but hearing my dad's concern and his voice and what he said to me, I felt like that's when I realized I was in a war zone. That's what I felt like.
So pretty much we got home, I want to say something like 9 or 10 at night. But the moment we entered the Bronx, my mom, she just broke down and she's like, "My baby!" And she just just hugged me and just smothered me to life. I mean, it was in Korean, 우리 강아지. Oh, 우리 강아지, which means my puppy. And these were words she used when I was a baby. She used those words that she used when I was like an infant, like my little puppy, my little piglet, and I guess retelling you this, it sounds very strange, but I guess she reverted to those early words of affection for me, I almost lost you, Sorry, I didn't, yeah.
The first thing, I walked through the door and they grabbed me and I just collapsed on the floor and I just started bawling, crying. And I asked, "Have you guys heard from Shajan Mama? Have you heard from them?" She's like, "No, I called your aunt and we haven't heard." The last thing he did this morning was he bathed the kids. He had 4 children. He bathed them and he went off to work and he told his wife that, I'll be back in the evening. And she was calling his office and we never heard from him. He ended up passing away from maybe the collapse or from the impact. We never knew, but he never came back. We lost him that day.
I'm fairly sure that week, the rest of the week, I was just catatonically on my couch watching TV, trying to extract whatever information there was, trying to understand.
Stuyvesant was closed for a few weeks after the events, and my parents didn't let me out of the house. They didn't want me going anywhere. They wanted me to stay home. They were afraid that some random person with some preconceived notion or idea would take out their anger and frustrations, understandably. They would be angry and frustrated on some kid that they see who looks like something that they imagine to be fearful.
When we came back to school on October 8th or 9th, I remember the smell. It smelled like burning and maybe chemically, but it smelled terrible.
It was crazy. I mean, you had armed military checking our IDs going into school. You couldn't cross the West Side Highway without being checked.
I think there was a point of pride of not letting ourselves be too affected or letting ourselves show that we were too affected.
I feel like it's a pretty safe place to be, and I know that it'll bring back emotions for me to be back in the building, but I think that it's things that I can cope with.
One of the barges that was removing debris from the World Trade Center was placed just north of our building in the Hudson River.
We were 4 or 5 blocks from this burning pile of rubble. You could smell it every day going into school. It had a very unique smell that you never want to smell again. But that was reality, and that was life at Stuyvesant.
that whole sophomore year, I was always afraid when I heard planes like that shh, you know, the like overhead that whistling, any sounds like that always like made me sweat a little bit.
There was a lot of anxiety around the backlash that people of color, especially that look like me, were experiencing across the city, across the country. And that was a very real part of the aftermath. There were stories about people wearing turbans or people that were Indian or Bengali or Pakistani getting attacked and getting beaten. And my mother was hearing all of these stories as well. And she was scared. You know, she was scared for me.
And we were always proud Americans. And my father was the biggest supporter of America in every Olympics leading up to that point. I just remember I thought it was so funny. I'm like, Dad, you're not from here. Why do you like America so much in the Olympics? And he was very happy and proud to be from here. And that week, both my father and my mother went out. They bought American flag stickers, 2 each, and they put them directly onto our cars. Not only because they were proud Americans, but because they didn't want people to feel like they were outsiders. And I was upset, not because I have any disrespect for the American flag, but I felt like you don't need to show anybody or prove to anybody that you belong here.
My mom was a life insurance agent. I remember she had clients where the FBI would go over their house, Muslim clients, Pakistanis, and they would just like shake up all their furniture, look through stuff, find nothing, leave, come back 2 weeks later. And so these are things I don't think like the mass media was talking about, but through literally just ground level community bubble stuff, I started seeing how this was really affecting our community, that people were losing their jobs, people were losing their business. The collateral damage of 9/11 is really like, there's so much collateral damage, but a lot of it is brown identity in America.
Even though our senior year was completely marred by this experience, the internal Stuyvesant experience was incredible for me. My senior year of high school was my favorite year of high school. Because of the way we came together, there was just a harmony in our class. And that harmony was because of what we went through and how it brought us together and how we understood that everyone was accepting of one another and everyone loved each other. That was the difference.
There were a lot more impassioned political conversations in social studies classrooms, very strongly differing opinions about whether or not we should be getting into a war, about what role we had played on bringing this on ourselves, if any. But we sure did get Bill Clinton to speak at our graduation.
I thank the class of 2002 for all you did in the aftermath of September the 11th, and I thank you for the courage and determination and spirit with which you bore this great difficulty, something someone your age should never have to face.
Our graduation song was just so patriotic. I vow to you, my country, all earthly things above, a love that asks no question, a love that stands the test. And there's more stuff, but like seriously, a love that asks no question is not a love that I want to have for my country. I think it's bullshit. So I didn't really like that that was our graduation song. It pissed me off. But the chorus instructor was a very patriotic woman, and she totally vetoed those of us who really wanted to make Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody our graduation song. So that also colored graduation.
We're still in the post 9/11 world. As a global society, like everything is based on protection. We're still fighting wars against the organizations that help perpetuate 9/11. And so that was the turning point of Carlos who thought that the world was going to be a peaceful, happy place by the time he grew up, and the one that was like, okay, this is the reality that we live in.
I remember it, and I think about it all the time. I just knew that this was life-altering. And to this day, I still feel like it completely changed who I was as a person.
We were just so close. I think that the people who were together on that day and around that day really solidified relationships in ways that have carried forward. I don't know anyone who is as close with their friends from high school as I am with the friends who I had at that time.
You know, I was lucky enough to not lose anyone in the attacks, but I mean, the whole world changed. You know, the world is still feeling the shocks of 9/11.
There's a long history of hate in this country, and I think how you process events like this and how much hate you ingest into your process shows what a country is, and I think in that respect, we as a country failed.
I don't feel like the world is any safer or closer to accepting Muslim Americans or minority Americans any more than the days after September 11th. And I feel that as long as hate and ignorance is around and perpetuated and not snuffed out, people will always live in fear of those who are different.
When my first child was born, and basically every year since that she's been awake, when I get home on September 11th and they're shining the memorial light, I've taken her out to the waterfront to see the light and tell her a little bit about September 11th. I want my children to understand that the world doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to look like a place where we point to people based on their differences because there's something that we think we have to fear. And I would love for them to understand that that perspective doesn't have to continue to exist, and they can work to change that perspective.
You know, people thrive and rebuild and recover despite difficulties, and I think that's a testament to all of us. And the people who are rebuilding America, they're also immigrants. They continue to come and they continue to make America a stronger, better, more diverse, smarter place. It's still a land of opportunity. People still want to come, and I think that is a testament to not just New York, but also like the human spirit generally.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, We're going flag shopping for American flags. They're staring at our turbans, they're calling them rags. They're calling them towels, they're calling them diapers. They're more like crowns, let's strike them like vipers. I know why they mad, but why call us Arabs? We sad like they sad, but now we buy they flags. We're going American flag shopping. Red, white, blue on our crib. The neighbors threw rocks at the house. They making it harder to live.